everyone. Thank you for being prompt a little bit early. I appreciate that.
Encouraging.
I'm gonna kick things off here. If I can figure out how to do that. Okay, we're gonna start with a quick question. This is one of my favorite questions about faxes. Do you know when the fax machine was invented or patented? This is a surprise for most people.
Hey, Mike.
Yep.
It looks like you're showing your presentation not in presentation mode on your.
Oh, how about that? Okay, sorry about that. Let me switch that.
Thanks, Sean.
Good catch.
There's only two kinds of presenters that happens to: those that have and those that will.
So is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And thanks for the person who gave that shout out. Many people don't know when the fax machine was patented, and you can feel free to use the Q&A panel to give your guess. But a lot of people think this is definitely a 20th century invention, right? It probably happened around the war. The number one guess I get is maybe 1941. No, not quite. The second most common guess I get is Xerox and IBM and office equipment was really coming into its own in the 50s and 60s. This seems like a sensible time. Also the year I was born, not 1964. One of the things that surprises people is that the fax machine was invented in the 19th century. Indeed it was. So I'm very proud of Chicago. Chicago had the Columbian Exposition in 1893. You think it might have came out of there? Things like Cracker Jack and Pabst Blue Ribbon came out of the Columbian Exposition, but indeed the fax machine did not. It was actually invented in 1841 and patented in 1843 by a guy named Alexander Bain, who created this gizmo up on your screen to take a chemical process and transfer documents over telegraph lines. So
a couple people got it right.
So the fax even predates the phone call and the phone wires. So thanks for participating in that. I was going to do that as a poll, but this is one of our first webinars of the year, so we wanted to make sure that we're getting this right. So some of you have already figured it out. I just wanted to highlight some kind of rules of the webinar. I've kept my picture up on your screen, so hopefully you're seeing that. And the idea of that was to make it a little bit more personal. Welcome to my office. And Bill will be joining as well and chiming in. We'll talk about participants in the middle in a moment. But if you want to interact, which we hope you will, and ask some questions, we'll get to questions at the end. Simply clicking on the Q&A box, and whether you're on a Mac or a tablet or a phone, it works fairly similar. I tried doing this on my iPhone and actually worked out surprisingly well. You can't ask an anonymous question. We've made it that you have to ask as yourself. And just to note, all your questions, we value them. This webinar is really about education and it's for you. So please feel free to ask your questions, and we'll, if we don't get to all of them before we come up to the top of the next hour, we're gonna put them in our response back to you guys to make sure we get them to you. So thanks again for joining. So I'm Mike Hurley. I'm gonna be your host, and my co-host Bill, I'll introduce in a moment. If you're on the right call, if you're in the right place, you're hoping to get to this webinar, Turning Faxes into Data. Our hope is that you come out of this realizing that you can turn faxes into data. It is possible. And that the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning has really made that a possibility and has overcome many of the challenges that you have, or that we've had in the past. Let me move my thing over. I think I just got a note that I was not up on the screen, so let me put me up there. There you go. Welcome to my office. Okay, so we're gonna be about 40 minutes of content or so. That's how we've timed it out. So again, we're hoping to have some time for questions and be able to walk through your questions at the end. So just to kick off a little background on fax. Fax is a long time instrument, 170 years we've been using the fax, right now, almost 180. And a gentleman, Mark Malone, publishes this analysis. I think he does it yearly. It's really excellent, and I found it in my research last year. The really interesting thing um, about the document is it gives some insights on what's really happening with fax volumes, fax costs, that kind of thing, and what the different uh, providers, cloud fax server, different technologies are working. But I thought this particular quote was really great, and I wanted to share it with you because it's really kind of harks to what we've been proposing around fax, which is you know fax is not going away anytime soon, even if we'd like it to. And really, what's really the key right now is fax automation. We really need to get to the point where faxes are coming in, and it's not such a problem to deal with that. So what's really happened in that second bit of green there, technologies like AI, machine learning, optical character recognition, data extraction technologies are really making fax automation as a part of digital transformation a really big part. So I wanted to give a plug to Mark's report. It's really excellent. If you want interested in that, or if you're interested in that, feel free to go to Fax 2020. It is a paid report, but depending on your use of fax, may be well worth it. So hi everyone. I want to introduce our co-presenters, Bill Johnson and myself. I'll go quick. My name is Mike Hurley. I'm the president and founder, one of the founders of BRYJ. BRYJ is about helping companies turn documents into data. We do that through consulting and integration services. I've been working in these technologies now for 25 years. We call it intelligent data capture, intelligent document capture. And it includes things like OCR, enterprise content management, workflow, maybe some technologies that you've been involved in. And lately, we've spent the last couple of years on interoperability. And for healthcare, we do a lot of work in healthcare. Healthcare interoperability, the main interoperability device, unfortunately, is still the fax machine. So we've been working with our customers to determine not only how to use advanced technologies that we're going to talk about today, but how to make the fax a little bit less onerous. So that's me, Mike Hurley. Bill, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, be glad to. Thanks, Mike. I'm Bill Johnson, the Vice President of Global Sales for Parascript. I've been involved in business process improvement for about 40 years, first starting out in industrial engineering and manufacturing, automation in the manufacturing space, then moved to EDI. And the last 25 years or so, I've been in the ECM space, 20 years as the founder and chief cook and bottle washer of a systems integration firm that provided thousands of applications to hundreds of customers over that time in almost every vertical market and horizontal application. So the perspective I bring comes from having been there and done that. So I have done what you do. I provided solutions to y'all, and that's how we're approaching the market, is from Mike and I's perspective in that regard. And very, very happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill. So we're going to dive right in. So no time to waste here. We have a really tight agenda. We want to tell you a little bit about why we wanted to have this conversation with you all. Why fax? Why is that so important? Why does it matter? Why is AI very important? What is that about? We want to dive into the technical challenge, but I want to point out that we're really not focused on a product for this webinar. We really wanted to talk about how to bring everybody up to the same kind of basis, both business and technical folks around fax. What are the challenges? How have they been overcome? What are different ways to solve the problem? And most importantly, how to get started. This is not a simple problem. It's been around for 180 years, right? So we've got to work through that together. So that's our agenda today. We're gonna jump right in. I see a comment that fax is the cockroach of technology from Paul. I totally agree, Paul.
I like that.
It just won't die. So I'm a big fan of the movie Groundhog's Day, and I thought it was a great way to describe our inspiration for this webinar, and really overall kind of our methodology or our thinking around fax and AI. The movie was created in 1993 by another Chicago native, Harold Ramis, and Phil, the main character played by Bill Murray, spends 34 years waking up to the same day, reliving the same day again and again and again until he finally gets it. He figures it out and is able to move on. Similarly, for the last several years, I've been walking through customers and prospects in different organizations who are dealing with fax in pretty much the same way that they've done for 10 plus years, maybe even as long as 20. The paper's gone, but fax is still available and still around. So I keep going through these offices, and we're going to dive into it a little deeper, that faxes come in, they're routed via email, data entry happens. It takes a lot of time, it's expensive. So Bill, any thoughts on your inspiration?
Yeah, it reminds me of Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right on. I totally agree. So I won't be singing any Sonny and Cher tunes if you're familiar with the movie, but just keep that in mind because it's really a common theme. So this Groundhog Day for fax starts with nowadays starts with the fax server, maybe starts with a cloud fax provider. So one of the most interesting things about the problem of fax, it's become very much invisible. And what I mean by that is we used to have fax machines in most departments, sometimes many fax machines, people sending things out, paper coming in, paper being divvied up for people to enter. Now that's all gone under the covers through the use of digital faxing, which is definitely improvement, certainly an improvement over paper. But the challenge is that most of those faxes end up in Outlook, maybe a Gmail inbox for a department. That's a step ahead. It's an improvement, but not a fair, really great one. And the reason why is somebody or a group of people have to monitor that inbox. They have to triage it, figure out what it is, who created it, what's it all about. This isn't for me. I have to route it to another person. So it has to go through another review. That's another human being that's taking time and expense to make that happen. Hopefully it's to the right person. When it ultimately does get to the right person, then they have to do some data entry on it. Sometimes it's data entry into multiple systems. It might be an ECM or workflow system. It might be a core admin system, an ERP. And so it's not uncommon for organizations that I've seen have to enter a fax or even another document multiple times to get it into that system of record. Clearly not an efficient process. And certainly we'll talk about the cost involved here, the customer experience issues, and really the speed challenges of this process.
Mike, I'd like to amplify your comments on the review too. I don't think we have enough consideration for the cost of error correction. The primary business process is designed around the assumption that faxes are coming to the right inbox in the first place and are routable. There's that whole other error correction process, or what I call the 12-step program, to deal with the exceptions that has to be identified, qualified, and reinserted back into workflow. It's very expensive.
Agreed. And shockingly, this is still the common mode. Even if there's, instead of Outlook, it's a workflow system, there's still a lot of data entry into a workflow or ECM system. And I've seen a lot of this over the last several years. So how do we break that cycle? How do we change that model? That's what this webinar is all about, first of all. And we're going to change it with what we call intelligent document capture, which leverages AI and machine learning to turn those documents into data. Because what we get faxes, but we really want data, right? So how do we do that? How do we make use of this technology? And as you see here, it really changes the model. Now the fax comes into the fax server, AI ingests it, it chunks through it, cleans it up, recognizes what document it is, recognizes the data that needs to be extracted, and then in straight-through processing, hands it right to the system of record with no human involvement. And with fax, there's still some human involvement, but the key is, can we shrink that to a very narrow margin? And what we're finding is you can.
I'll keep piping up with my industrial engineering or my constraint theory mindset. I mean, this new process that the reason it excites me is because it eliminates that human-based function of match, sort, and deliver, which is an inordinate amount of time that we spend on a transaction without improving the intellectual properties of it at all. And by automating that process, we not only deliver only the work to a person that can be worked and is ready for work, we're also, because of increased accuracy, we're reducing errors that have such a high, almost exponential cost to correct. So it's a win-win in that regard.
Agreed. Thanks, Bill. You're kind of like the Frank Gifford of this webinar, so thanks for that. I'll be the, is it Don Meredith? I forget who the play-by-play was. Anyway, so thanks for that. So there's a lot of challenges, right? And we wanted to approach this from both a business and technical perspective. So by the way, there are likely technical people on this webinar who want to do like dive into the weeds, and I totally get that. And if you are that person, just send me a note after this and we'd be happy to do a tech deep dive. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to level set with everybody for this webinar, but happy to do it. And if there's business people that want to talk about the business process improvement side of this, we're happy to have that conversation too. But in this section of the webinar, we really wanted to talk about challenges with reading documents. What are the business problems? What are the technical problems? And then how can we fix those in order to really improve business processes and start achieving digital transformation? So we're going to talk through that. So the first thing is volume. There's a lot of faxes going on right now, a surprising amount. I talked to an e-fax provider, and they told me there's about 40 to 50 billion faxes a year in the US alone being sent and received. 40 to 50 billion with a B. That's a ton of faxes. It's not uncommon for a decent-sized company, mid-size or larger, getting orders, getting applications, getting enrollment documents, prior authorizations, medical records, you name it. There's a ton of documents happening. It's not uncommon for an organization to get 1 million fax pages a year. And we'll talk about the cost implications of that in just a minute. But it's a really unique problem that's hidden from most executives. So if you're working for a company right now, your executives are probably not asking you, hey, how do we fix this fax problem? Because the volume has really been digitized and been routed through email, as we talked about before. So let's talk about cost. A lot of people I talk to say, hey, we solved that fax problem long ago. We got fax servers now. Faxes are basically free, Mike. Why are we even talking about this? And I totally get it. But faxes are not free. Faxes are totally not free. Even a simple outbound fax that you send from a word processor using some fax printer driver still cost a couple bucks because you've got all the hardware, the software, the servers, the IT people, the configuration at the workstation, the troubleshooting, the support desk. All that stuff adds up to probably $1 or $2 on an outbound fax. But most importantly, the faxes that are coming in from an inbound perspective really cost money. The numbers that I said, and we did way too much research on this last year to try to find like what the numbers were on fax. And for an inbound fax, especially in healthcare, it's around $10 to $15 when you factor in all the costs. So if you think about that company receiving 1 million fax pages a year, sending and receiving, let's say half of them are received in 500,000 pages times $10. That is not insignificant. So cost is still a big issue. Faxes are not free.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to jump off script a little bit here because you triggered a thought. One of the things that happened with digitization is when we got the paper off the desk, we removed the visceral indication of an issue with volume or, because it's no longer sitting in an in basket or printing off of a fax machine that needs replacing the roll and things like that. So most of corporate America is operating under the notion that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they don't even perceive there's a problem because there's no physical indication that things are backing up and piling up because it's piling up on the server, not on the desk.
I could not agree more. Totally agreed. Next business challenge with fax is most people don't like dealing with faxes. They want data, right? Fax is a real customer experience challenge. If you look at internal customers, it's a challenge. Faxes get lost. Faxes have to be dealt with. but your end user customers, your partners, all these people have to send and receive faxes, and it's quite a challenge. I lost my place here. So a couple points I wanted to highlight about faxes are they are painful for your customers. So there's a big push in many organizations today around customer experience. Here's a customer experience. I send you a fax. Did you get it? Now I have to call. Did you get it? Did you get it yet? Are you sure you got it? And they have the same challenges on their side, right? It might have got routed to the wrong inbox at their organization. But if you receive a fax, it's even worse. Imagine that. Receiving a fax on your side, you have to decide what it is. Like, somebody just sent me this. Who sent it? Why did they send it? What's it for? Is it urgent? What do I do with it? You know, is this multiple transactions that I have to deal with that happen to come in this 500-page fax? It's painful for your organization as well as it is for the folks that have to send it. I just saw a note here that the average size hospital sends and receives on average 500,000 pages a month. That's 16,000 pages per day. So thanks for that comment. But customer experience is a key reason we have to solve the fax problem. Finally, and this is a real bane for most people, faxes are really slow. This is a turtle race, and I hope those people are patient because it might take a long time, just as faxes do. It's not uncommon for a fax to take 24 to 48 hours to wind its way to the right system of record. During that time, nobody in the organization knows it's come. They don't know what it's about. Customer service is getting a call from that person going, did you get my fax? I'm not showing it, but it might take us 2 to 4 days or 2 to 3 days to get that fax to get that fax in our system. That's not a great thing to say about faxes coming in. And the last thing I'll say about this slide is what's really challenging on process speed is if it's urgent, like there's a big challenge in the healthcare industry around prior authorization where doctors have to get the insurance company to approve a procedure or a drug. That could be urgent. You could be literally on the table or waiting for some urgent medication. And those faxes that are urgent, they still are bound by that same process, and it can be a real problem. So these are the key business challenges with fax. There's probably a lot more and maybe more that you encounter, but this is what we're hearing from our customers these days.
Yeah, Mike, I promise to try and stifle myself on this constraint theory stuff, but this really flies in the face of throughput management. I mean, when it comes to speed, it's really interesting when you think about it. In the manufacturing world back in the 70s and 80s, we automated the assembly process, welding and bolting and framing, with robots. It replaced people on the manufacturing floor, and then humans managed and monitored those bots, new industry term. Well, in document-based business process, because up until now we couldn't outperform the human ability to perceive and interpret a document, we focused on automating the delivery systems of work transactions to a person. Well, now we've reached a point where we can deliver a work item to a person in the time it takes them to perform that work. At this level of efficiency, what it means is that for a given amount of work, even if we doubled the staff, we wouldn't be able to increase throughput at all. I mean, we're going as fast as we can for the number of people and the number of transactions. And if we wanted to go faster, we can't double the population in order to go faster. I mean, we've reached parity, so to speak, with that level of it. And faxes are inherently slow, as you stated, and require several human touches for the most part. So in the end, any incremental increase in throughput here through automation will manifest itself exponentially further down the work stream and the ensuing steps of the business process. I mean, it's amazing to kind of flowchart out.
Totally agreed. I couldn't agree more. So I just want to take a quick pause here. Please feel free to send a note or a chat or a question if we're going too fast, too slow, you don't like the puzzle back behind me, or whatever it is, because we're going to keep going, but I want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of this. So we're going to dive into technical challenges right now, and there's no shortage of them. The reason why most faxes don't turn into data by software products today is because there are some technical challenges. We're going to walk through a handful of them just so you get a sense of them. If you're a business person, don't fear. We're not going to get too techie. But just a couple notes. Faxes, scanned images, a picture from your iPhone, a PDF, which is typically an image, are all images. What does that mean? It's just a picture. And there's typically very little, if any, data. Faxes do send a little data. Sometimes a scanned image or a PDF will have a little data. But in most cases, these objects, they're just images. And I bring that up because I was just in a recent meeting and the person goes, what do you mean a fax doesn't have any data? And the truth of the matter is most end users don't realize that these documents are just images. And images are imperfect. This is a bad example, right? There's no confidential information in this whole presentation, so don't worry about this saying the Secretary of Defense. But you see that there's a bunch of pepper or noise on this page. That can make even looking at this document kind of difficult. But keying from this document or an OCR product trying to read this document is intensely difficult. It really makes fax, this is a common problem with fax, makes that a real challenge for reading characters. The next thing is skew. It's not uncommon for us to get a document, and you and I can read this document no problem. We might tilt our head a little bit if you're me, but typically we'll be able to right size that or just twist it in our hand or be able to adapt to the changes. But skew for technologies, skew is a big problem, and not one that many products can deal with well, especially with the fax. You also have distortion. You've probably done this when back in school, and we're going to talk a little bit more about school, but back in school you might have copied a book on a photocopy machine and kind of get this waviness. That causes all kinds of problems. It's not only difficult to read, but it's just generally challenging. And then there's some particular problems with faxes because I think one of the notes from one of our attendees was that you can get a 500-page fax with 15 different transactions in it. You have to separate those out for those to be useful. If you're getting health claims, for example, it's not uncommon for a provider to send 10 or 15 or 20 different claims or 20 or 15 to 20 different prior authorizations. So you have to break those apart, and that's not easy. You have to deal with things like, are all the pages there? Did they all get in there? Then you have to deal with things like orientation. Sometimes they can come in upside down or sideways. So faxes create some interesting and unique challenges. You do have these problems as well with scanned images and PDFs and photographs as well, but in varying degrees of difficulty. It's really a problem with fax. And so the key thing about fax is what we've done as a society is mostly just thrown bodies at it, right? We've really asked on part of our organization a group of people to go, probably not like this 1950s picture of people keying in accounting documents, right? But whether it's noisy or skewed or has other quality challenges, there's a group of people that are responsible for keying this in, and it's not an insignificant number of people keying in these 40 to 50 billion documents a year. Bill, comments?
Well, yeah, what strikes me from a architectural solution designer and put this stuff in, on top of all of that, you have to remember that as a rule, even the best data entry operator will get 1 in 67 characters keyed in correctly. In context, what does that mean? It means 1 in 8 social security numbers will be wrong. 1 in 10 invoice or order numbers will be wrong. It could be the routing instructions to which department the fax goes to will be wrong. And those ultimately end up in that 12-step program or the error resolution subroutine. Again, increasing the cost of the transaction, slowing it down without improving the intellectual property of it one iota.
Agreed. So hopefully you've gotten in this section that fax is not free. There's a lot of them. They cost a lot of money. They hamper customer service. As Bill just pointed out, they add errors and they really slow down process. So there's really a lot of challenges with fax. And so let's dive into solutions. We want to move forward here and start looking at ways to solve this problem. And our approach, I think I did my first data extraction OCR project in 1992. something like that. And it was reading pension records for a large telecom. Well, there was only one telecom at the time, right? AT&T. The similar problems that we had in 1992 are still a lot of the challenges today. The good news is there are now technologies that can address them. But I wanted to give you a quick baseline on what the technologies are that read documents today. A lot of people generically refer to them as OCR, and I just wanted to highlight that there's OCR is kind of a catch-all phrase that encompasses a bunch of different technologies. I'm not going to dive too deep in there, but I just want to level set everybody on the different technologies that we call data extraction, but a lot of folks in the marketplace call OCR. So OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. It's really focused on machine printed typed documents. Think of a piece of correspondence or a typed form or a PDF that's been filled and sent as a PDF to your organization. Machine printed characters. ICR stands for Intelligent Character Recognition. Not sure why, I never figured that out, but it's focused mostly on handprint. And this has been a real challenge for data extraction tools and OCR tools in the past. ICR has not been an area that those products have excelled at. OMR stands for Optical Mark Recognition for checkboxes, right? In a survey, we're working on a survey project right now. Surveys, you check a box, we want to read that, male, female, yes, no, so that we can provide that data to the underlying systems. And then finally, barcodes. So all kinds of different barcodes, all kinds of different symbologies, how to use that word, because my friend Joe DiCarlo's on our call today. And all those things are great, and they make a world of difference, but they're challenges because faxes can muck up the works, including even the barcode can be impacted because if there's noise or it's shifted or it's not read properly, barcodes all of a sudden become not as helpful as you'd hoped. So these are the traditional data extraction tools. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, how about a legal page printed on 8.5 by 11 faxed?
Yeah, I think we've all got our horror stories, and I was just at a customer who gets medical records faxed to them, and some of the medical records, kind of become the files become so big that it's really hard to deal with, and those are all over the map, as you might have seen. And you'd have to create a template, but for each form, for each page, for each version, and then you'd have to deal with every different variation there. Sometimes people have to deal with, some tools require you to have a different template for a fax opposed to a scanned image. There's all kinds of different challenges here. The key thing is it's practically impossible for fax, right? Even if I could do this, even if I could throw the right amount of manpower to create all these templates and deal with all the changes as they go on, I'd still have the problem of forms changing and adapting all the time, which would really require me to have an army of people, which for most of us is impractical, so practically impossible. So the reason, the number one question I get is, Mike, if this is such a big problem, why hasn't somebody taken it on before? And the issue is you need handcrafted professionals, creating these templates and really driving them forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in the frame of another movie, right? I think many of you probably saw Terminator, very popular. And I think a lot of us got our concepts of AI maybe from the concept of Skynet and these a self-aware artificial intelligence system that's at war with humans, trying to wipe us out or whatever. I think we're still a really long way away from there. But some of the key concepts of artificial intelligence are coming into the market, and they're very important and they're very, very valuable. But there's a lot of marketing hoo-ha about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Basically, every company's throwing it into their marketing phrases without really knowing what it means. We're not going to explain artificial intelligence today. Time will not allow that. But we're going to talk about it in the context of machine learning. Machine learning is a part of artificial intelligence where machines can learn in a continuous learning mode, also learn from samples. And we're gonna walk you through an example of that. So we call machine learning smart learning. And I thought to explain machine learning, because a lot of people don't know what it what it really means. I'm going to use an example. This is the University of Chicago Library, which is a beautiful place. And if you ever get to Chicago, go there in Hyde Park. Great place to read a book or just hang out. But we're going to talk about how students learn as an example of how machines learn. It might help make the connections, because I think some of these concepts are difficult and complex sometimes. So how does a student learn? Typically at the University of Chicago, a professor will walk up to a chalkboard or a whiteboard and say, hey, the context today is geometry. We're going to talk about geometry. I'm going to teach you about it. And first of all, I'm going to go through some sample problems on the board to give you the concepts. I want you to learn the concepts of geometry, because I'm going to send you home with some homework, probably 17 or 18 hours of homework that you can continue to try this different problems and fight with the concepts till you kind of make it or kind of figure it out. And then we're going to give you an exam to make sure that you get the concepts. Then we're going to send you to other classes at the University of Chicago so you can apply that learning, build on that learning, and hopefully when you leave the doors, you become a lifelong learner, right? You're continuously learning as you go on. That's how we learn today, right? Context, examples, repetitive nature of learning something again and again and again, testing ourselves, and then learning, applying and learning lifelong. That's almost exactly how machine learning works. Smart learning, let's call the context applications. We're getting applications in, HR applications via fax, right? If we get those applications in, we need to provide some sample problems, right? So in machine learning, what you do is you give the machine truth data and truth documents. These are about 1,000 to 2,000 samples of documents already processed, and you've keyed. We run those samples through and say, here you go, here's the truth. This is how we read this data from these documents. That's called training. So we train machine learning, say, here's what's happening. A key difference, and maybe Bill, you can talk about this after I finish this example, but there's unattended training and attended training, or human-driven training. What I'm talking about here is unattended training, where we give a bunch of samples and the machine chunks through the examples. Once we're done with training, the machine goes, yep, I'm ready for some test examples. We throw another deck through, another group of data, truth data through with about 1,000 to 2,000 documents, faxes, with the data that was entered along with that. So we test the system to see if we got it right. That's essentially our exam. And then we apply it to all the new faxes coming in to that fax line. That's great. We're going to talk about continuous learning, because after that's done, the coolest thing about machine learning is not only does it allow us to get this take away the handcrafted nature of a bunch of people creating all these templates. The machine does that, but also what's cool is it continuously learns as we get new documents in. And I think that's amazing. Bill, any comments before we move on?
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well, Mike. Just to kind of an edge on it. In order to grade the accuracy of a test, you have to have an answer key. So the professor sends out the test. He knows what the answers are. When we do this and we use our smart learning engines to train the system, we're basically taking knowns, letting the machine teach itself. And that gets us out of the box and running very, very quickly, which is, we'll talk about time to live later. The continuous learning is incredibly important, because you're taking variations in output, both machine at high confidence and then human corrected stuff. We do statistical analysis on it, and then we update the rules in which we process things all the way down to the field level. So the difference being, you can think of it as these self-driving cars that are constantly monitoring their situation and reacting to the environment to swerve left, turn right, slow down, speed up. But we do much the same thing in almost near real time. The difference being, we remember that experience and adapt the road, if you will, to meet our needs. So it's pretty exciting. It's the first time, I think, in the industry's history that it's been accomplished. And the major result of that is we now are able to produce measurable and consistent what we call straight through processing. In other words, for the first time in my experience in this industry, we can have a measurable and predicted number of documents go through without any human touch at all.
Right on. Well, let's dive into that as part of another example here. There we go. Okay. So how does it work? I just want to kind of highlight this one more time, just in a slightly different context. So what we do is we tell the AI, hey, we've got some context here. You're gonna learn applications. We train it. Here are some examples of previous faxes and data. So we can leverage a current repository of all this stuff, whether it's in ECM or in the fax the capability, or in fax servers. We test. Here's another sample. Let's run these through and make sure we got it. And then finally apply it. Okay, now do this every time. Every time you see this document, go extract these fields. And in a slightly different way, and I'm gonna speed up because I wanna make sure that we end with a little time for questions. That fax server receives the message. The AI, the machine learning, will do what's called classification. It'll identify the document type. It'll remove all the noise and improve the image. Then it'll hand it off to extraction and say, hey, here are all the fields that need to be handed. This is the document type. Go extract these fields from this document type. For certain fields you want a very high confidence rate on. You want to make sure that you got it right. We absolutely handle that through a process called verification, so that you can make sure that you've got the data correctly. Now it's handed off to the data store. And I just want to point out what Bill highlighted is many times this will go straight through. So the goal here is, while this is interesting technology, it's most interesting because I can reduce cost, I can speed up the process, I can improve customer experience, and that's really what it's all about.
You know, one thing I'd add right here, Mike, is you know, the classification. What is it? The classification step. Many products rely on full-page OCR in order to run their algorithms across the text that determine what the document is. Parascript uses a combination of clustering, image and visual classifiers, and OCR. Greatly reduces the overhead requirement. We look at it more like a person does it. If you've ever seen the memes on the internet where if you can read this, you're probably a genius. All you have to do is recognize the first and last letter and all that kind of stuff. So we handle it specifically different, and it's important because classifying a document correctly then drives the rules for extraction. If you blow it at class, you've blown it several steps down then.
Cool. So it's 12:45. Our goal is to get you to your next meeting on time. So I'm gonna keep going. Continuous smart learning is an important part of the process, something that is really valuable as you move on. Bill, if it's okay, I'm gonna jump through this case study and move on, because I want to leave us enough time for questions. But do you want to just mention this really quickly? Because I think there's some key points here that might be very valuable to mention briefly.
Yeah, thanks. So for me, there are three significant things associated with this capability. One, from a project standpoint, it dramatically reduces time to live. By training the system through compute time at greater degrees of accuracy, you can literally be up and running in days as opposed to 2 months. It provides near real-time adaptability with regard to variations of inbound documents. So it's learning on the fly, and you can apply learning as often as you want. And then 3, it substantially reduces the dependency on specialized or proprietary IT resources. Guys and gals sitting in the back writing regexes forever and all that stuff. So, you know, those are the three opportunities that I see that are both constraints and enablers, and that's what this does. Right
on. Thanks, Bill. And if folks would like to talk more in terms of case studies, happy to do that as a side conversation when we have a little bit more time. Happy to jump on a call or a web meeting, me and Bill or either of us. So let's talk about getting started, because I think one of the key questions I get as well is, hey, this is so big. You know, we have 1 million faxes. Where do we start? We have dozens of fax lines. We have hundreds or thousands of documents a day that we have to deal with. How do we go in? And I just want to highlight another Chicago-based company. It's kind of like old school Chicago today. But a company, DocuLabs, a consulting company, independent consulting company in Chicago that I really like, have been around for 25 years. I was actually at their first presentation, a bit of trivia, back when they started. That they have a great ebook called The 5 Key Factors of Being Successful with a Proof of Concept. And I love the quote: "We strongly recommend that you do a POC in your environment if you're thinking about doing this." I totally agree. You should think Missouri. Missouri is a show me state. Show me that you can do this. And if you can't, let's know up front, right? Before we spend a lot of money and a lot of time driving through this. So thanks to the folks at DocuLabs, and I think Parascript contributed to that as well. So thanks to both of you on that. I want to talk briefly about proof of concepts. All right, here's one of my big beefs. I've been in this industry now for 20 plus years. If you can get the vendors to do a POC, it's really difficult. It's really pinned down. It's time consuming. It's slow. It's expensive. I hate it. It should be obvious by now, right? But most importantly, if I'm a business person and I have to take this back to my executives, I only have technology information that I have to pour through. That's not going to be interesting to my executives. I need useful information. I need an ROI. If I'm going to spend money on this stuff, how much is it going to save me? What's it going to do for my customers? What's it going to do for my business? So at BRYJ, and this is kind of our one kind of call to action slide, we created an innovation proof of concept project. The idea was, can we create a checklisted approach? If you haven't read it, read Atul Gawande's checklist manifesto. I'm a big believer. But the concept here is, can we whittle this stuff down, do a bunch of work before we come on site, do 2 days of intensive work in a secure way, whether it's healthcare documents or financial documents or insurance, that doesn't matter. Let's do this in the highest security possible. Do it at a very low cost with people's documents to prove accuracy. That's very important, right? We want to make sure that we can read these faxes or documents. But also, this technology is really a financial tool. How much is it going to save me? No bull, what's it really mean? How much is it going to cost? What's it going to save me? And I think that's the focus of our POC. We typically charge $5,000 for our POCs. I won't buy a new boat with the $5,000 we make on that. It's really just to cover our expenses. But we decided to offer our innovation proof of concept to webinar participants for $2,500. It's only for participants on the webinar, and it's only available until March 31st, and we'll go back to our regular price. But I encourage you to think about, if you found these technologies or these concepts interesting, I'd ask you to consider thinking about an innovation proof of concept, and we can talk about that offline as well. I'm showing 10-2, Bill, so maybe some final remarks, and then I'm going to look through any questions. Folks, while you're listening to final remarks, this is your last chance to ask a question. You can click that Q&A on the bottom, on the Q&A button on the bottom, and send us a question if you'd like.
Well, I sure am pleased, proud, and impressed that everybody's staying with us. You know, there are obvious benefits to increased throughput from an ROI standpoint. And as a former provider and then consultant to end users, I get it. So as the time per transaction goes down, so does the internet cost per transaction. Increased throughput allows you to process more work with the same amount of labor, allowing growth with no infrastructure. There's also the hidden benefit and cost savings associated with accuracy. By increasing accuracy, you reduce errors to deal with. So think about it in terms of this. If you're only producing 5% errors out of that transaction fax traffic, it's only 10 times the level of effort to correct it. It means you're using 50% of your workforce on 5% of your volume. Pretty expensive stuff. A focused POC to demonstrate capability and capacity will validate your ability to achieve rapid application deployment. You can take those results then and then put them in your spreadsheet and figure out what your real potential savings are. And then you can make a go, no go decision, because, you know, there's that inherent cost of adoption as well. I mean, we could give you all this stuff and you're still going to have a significant expense internally to deploy it. So we want to make sure we cover all those bases for you.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks for co-hosting today. I really appreciate it. My final remarks are this. I had a call with a customer that had been rescheduled several times. Very busy guy, VP of IT in his company, is responsible for the ECM and their faxing as well. We had moved the appointment, finally had it yesterday scheduled. He didn't show up. It's always disappointing, right? He texts me back and goes, "Hey, I'm available right now. I was putting out a fire, no problem." As it turns out, the fire was about fax. And it was ironic that it was yesterday, and ironic that you know, this guy who has a very sophisticated IT operation and business operation is still challenged with fax. And his challenge was that people were who are handling the faxes were not handling them fully correct. They had a person who hadn't been trained properly, and it really screwed up the process. So my final remarks is, hopefully from this webinar today, you got the fact that you definitely can extract data and automate your faxes. Straight through processing is possible, meaning no human no human involvement, even if it's handprint. And I want to state that. So I just want to thank you for coming, and I want to offer some questions. I'm looking at my other screen here. So first of all, the recording, we'll be sharing the recording with all participants as long as you stay through the very end. I'm just kidding. If you registered, you're going to get a copy. We'll be sending that out in the next day or so. A question: can we handle handprint? Yes. In fact, Parascript, Bill, I'm not sure the number, but you guys read a bunch of envelopes, millions of envelopes a day for a big government customer.
It's not much. It's only about 300 million.
Is that a day?
A day.
A day. So yeah, so we can read handprint and cursive. Parascript got its start with checks. We can even read checks. Another question: can you receive the fax, extract information, and then send down both the image and data in JSON or XML? If you receive it directly, it would allow you to lower the total cost of ownership on a fax server. Yes, and yes, and yes, and I totally agree. So yes, all that's possible. The Parascript product, like many products, allows you to output in a variety of ways, including via web service or a flat file or CSV. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do that, so absolutely. Bill, I think you had some questions on your side that you were looking at. Do you have those handy?
I don't have them right here.
Okay.
Keep talking and I'll look them up.
All right. Well, it's 12:55, so I guess I'll just start wrapping it up, and I'll wrap it up with our final. So if you want to contact us, I wanted to first of all thank you again for coming by. This is our information. Feel free to call. Those are both our mobiles, and we'll be sending you a survey via SurveyMonkey, because we spare no expense with free surveys. We'll be sending you a SurveyMonkey survey as a part of the follow-up on this. Please give us your remarks. We're going to be having another event on claims, medical claims, which are, again, another problem that we thought should be resolved by now. But we're going to do in late April or early May, we're going to do one on claims. Hey, thank you again. Bill, any questions before we go? We'll give one more question.
No, I'm good. But you know what we can do is we got a stack of them actually here. We can, when we send out the recording, we can answer those in the email.
That sounds like a plan. Everybody, thank you very much. Thanks for coming to my office today and doing this webinar.
Thanks,
Please
everybody.
reach out if you have any questions, and have a great day. Be well. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.